to you powered by James Robert Fitness, and this is episode 23 of my podcast. And today's guest, I've got Patrick Anderson. He's a 4-time Paralympian, and of that he's a 3-time gold medalist from Sydney, Athens and London, and 1 silver medal from Beijing. He currently plays for the New York Rolling Knicks, and not forgetting, he's widely regarded as one of the best wheelchair basketball players in the world. So thanks again, Patrick, for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure.
So the first question I'd like to ask you, how did you come about getting into wheelchair basketball in the first place?
I grew up playing a lot of sports in my small town in Canada, particularly hockey, but I was sort of into whatever sport was put in front of me. And when I was 9, I was hit by a drunk driver and lost both my legs below the knee. Which was a little bit, that was obviously tough to deal with in a number of ways for me and my family, but particularly for me, it was really difficult to imagine how I was going to play sports again. That was really the most important thing to me as a 9-year-old boy, and for that reason, I'm really thankful that I was introduced to wheelchair basketball just a year later when I was 10. I know other people who acquire disabilities and don't have the opportunity to play anything just because they don't know about it for many, many years. So very lucky to be introduced to the sport when I was young, and I've been playing ever since.
And I think it's something you touched upon in other media work that you've done. Obviously, you had a good coach that taught you to work on different aspects of your shooting and things like that. Could you explain to the listeners how the coach went about doing that to get you to be a better player?
Yeah, I could tell the story of my career as just all these fortunate events and unfair advantages I had that had nothing to do with me, particularly my skill or talent or anything. One of them was, I had such an incredible first coach. His name was Jeff Penner. And, there were a number of guys that taught me a lot in those early years, but Jeff, a few years in, sort of started a junior team. When I started playing, I actually played with adults because we didn't even have a junior team. So I was, 11-year-old kid going to adult practices. And that's sort of another story about, I think, development. My development and others in my generation, we played so much against players much older than us. We kind of had to grow up pretty quick. There weren't as many junior opportunities. I think junior opportunities are great. I'm glad more of them exist now, but that was sort of a harsh reality at the time that maybe in some senses made us better. But I digress. Jeff, when I was 11, 12, 13, he was just great at challenging me, and he challenged me to use my left hand. He challenged me to shoot with proper form. And, because there's such a wide variety of functional ability and skill level at our practices, I didn't really realize this so much at the time, but in hindsight, I'm so thankful. Like, he was really good at reading me and knowing when my attention was wavering, if I was getting bored or maybe getting frustrated. And he would, if he saw that, he would send me off to a side basket and just, throw a challenge at me. Go hit 20 left-handed layups and come back, And, so yeah, he was really formative influence early on and really helped establish a fundamental sort of skill set. And but not only that, he was a really fun guy to be around and a really fun guy on the court. And as a player, he loved maybe making the extra pass, or he always used to say if we were up 20 or down 20 in a game, he would say, he'd pull, in the huddle, he'd say, for the people, and that was his code word or his code for. Do something fun, do something, throw behind the back pass or something, because the game's over and your parents over there are nodding off and the fans are falling asleep, So he had this real sense of like basketball as a show, a little bit of globetrotter in him. And I think for better or worse, some of that rubbed off. So I just think he was just such a great early influence on me to become a better basketball player, but also really enjoy the sport and enjoy sort of sharing the sport with people.
Okay. And then I've got one of the questions from one of my followers, Phil Gaskell asks, how long do you train each day? I'll kind of put that in perspective. How much do you train now as opposed to when you were with the national team?
I'm only able to train a couple days a week at the moment. And unless you consider, shooting hoops in the living room with my 1-year-old training. But going back, I don't know, my formative training was going into Sydney. I was at Illinois. We doing the college thing. Playing practicing 5 days a week, and then playing lots of tournaments. And maybe we got Monday off if we got in late Sunday night from home from a tournament. But we were back at it Tuesday morning at 6:30 a.m. and did that for 4 years. That was really my set my barometer for hard work. So coming out of that, I went to Europe, and this is, I'm talking about, in my 20s when we were winning gold medals and whatever. I was playing, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and a couple hours a day. But, as I got older, you learn and to train smarter. And you have to train smarter because sometimes injuries crop up, or your body can't quite recover the same way. I've never been very sophisticated in my use of supplements, legal kind or illegal kind, for that matter. I've never. That sounds like I've never been very sophisticated with my use of illegal supplements. I've never used any of that kind of stuff, really. So I'm kind of a, maybe there's something, could have been a little bit smarter with diet or that kind of thing as I got older. But in any case, going into London, though, I was really training on my own. This is 2012. I was, still am living in New York, and there's not a lot of guys around, not a lot of Canadian guys. So it was a lot of individual training on my own, and that, there's sort of a limit to how many hours you can spend in a gym by yourself. But, so I just try to pack as much as I could in a couple hours a day. And London, I was really, I was just in there kind of every day. I just had this groove going from about 6 months out with my shot and just the feel of the game. And so I just didn't want to take any chances with that. So I was just really humming. And also I was sort of experimenting at that time, well before then and since, with different chair setups, and I was trying to get comfortable with sort of a different experimental chair setup. So that was also driving me to the gym as well, because ever since about 2006 or so, I've sort of been just playing around and experimenting with different wheel sizes and camber and installation, just for the fun of it, kind of. But that's made me I've had to sort of chase sort of that oneness with the chair that I used to sort of take for granted. That's sort of the cost of being experimental, so that factored into it too.
But that's one of those things with wheelchair basketball. You want to be at one with the chair, and obviously in terms of, for the listeners that don't know, it's that sense of you want to be able to know if you turn one direction and say, for example, you feint one way, then go the other, you want the chair to be responsive to that second movement and not kind of held you back. So that's probably something you touch upon there, isn't it, Patrick?
Yeah, absolutely. Specifically, what changed for me in London was I've always used straps around my knees, the front of my knees, to push me back, sort of north-south in the chair, and then east-west. I have, side guards, and then sort of up and down straps. So in all sort of planes, I'm really cinched into the chair. And I think I was lucky to sort of having help develop. I was lucky to have had help developing that strapping system when I was pretty young, and I came along at a time in the mid-'90s when, for me, the influences were guys like Joey Johnson and Troy Sachs at the University of Whitewater, playing for Frogley, who were like 4-5s, who were just then really starting to strap into their chairs, and therefore, tilting and hopping their chairs. And I came along sort of a couple summers and trained with some of those guys and saw what they're doing as a 16, 17-year-old, and I was able to incorporate that kind of thinking and training into my game at a young age. Like I need to figure out my strapping installation, which was a little bit more of a challenge for me as a double amp versus these guys. Joey has 2 legs, Troy has 1 leg, so they just foot plate and away they go. But for me, I had to figure out that knee strap thing. But what I did, along with these knee pads that I still use, once I got that dialed in, that really helped me kind of move my chair. And obviously, I have an advantage as a double amputee. I don't have that extra weight on the front, so I can spin and accelerate quicker than somebody who has maybe a leg or or both legs. So yeah, I feel like that's been that was a real sort of another one of those things that was not anything I did. I just kind of came along at the right time to absorb some of those innovations at a young early point in my career.
Okay, that's quite interesting that you bring up. And the next question I've got from Chris Wilson is: do you follow a particular training plan? If so, can you let them have it?
Let them have it. No, this is about training, huh? This podcast. It's going to keep coming back to this. I'm never very good at these kind of questions. I guess the answer would be no. I mean, what do you mean by a training plan? Like some kind of guru or something?
I don't know, because how I read into it, and I've seen that you've done obviously a few YouTube videos on like training tips. That would be how I would read the question into it. What training tips would you possibly give? And obviously,
sure.
I would probably say to save you having to explain what tips it is, it's probably best to probably go to your YouTube channel for that, wouldn't it? To a certain extent.
Well, sure, but I guess I could touch on a few things. The one thing I haven't been great at least consistently over my career, is strength training. I'm very good at sort of aerobic and anaerobic training, that kind of thing, whether it's in my chair or on an upper body ergometer. I'm just good at pushing myself when it comes to that. With lifting, strength and conditioning, or strength training, that's more of a discipline that I struggle with on and off, and I probably paid a penalty for that over the years. So that's my weak spot, but I get it done. In terms of, I'll just say going into London, there were a few things that were sort of that I was mindful of. I think when it comes to like skill development, especially say shooting, everyone wants to shoot well. I had a lot of years, I guess, of a lot of shooting reps, but I wouldn't go into the gym. I'll put it this way: I took some time off. Actually, at that time, I thought I was retired before London. Came back. I didn't have, hadn't been playing much basketball, so I spent a lot of time just putting up a lot of reps. In one spot, grooving a shot, 20 shots, 30 shots, that kind of thing. Really grooving my form and trying to get a feel back. But as soon as I felt like I had that foundation down, I really switched into a mode where it was much more dynamic. Take one shot from that spot, move to a different spot, take a shot from there, go to the 3-point line, take a shot, go take a layup. And you see, I think one of the drills on one of my YouTube videos sort of shows that's just something that I came up with because I wanted to be more game-like. And that's really how I approached training going into London. I think that really helped me. I was also working out with a guy here in New York who was, at the time, like a last cut for the New York Knicks. Really, most incredible shooter I've ever seen in person. This guy is amazing. Brian Kortwitz is his name. I botched his last name, so I'm not exactly sure how to say it, but unreal. He was the top scorer in the Rucker Park League. He told me he's the only white leading scorer in the history of the Rucker, which is like a famous outdoor basketball court in Harlem here in New York. Anyway, I forget what his nickname. He had a cool nickname too. They have the guy with the MC who's like, talking trash and everything, and kind of doing play-by-play, kind of just talking trash to people. It was a really cool environment. I went to see him play, and just the most phenomenal shooter ever. And so I trained with him a little bit and just played shooting games with him. And lost every single time. But that was another thing that I really remember at the time was between him and Dave Durapo. I don't know if that name means anything to you, but he was a long time member of the Canadian national team and the most pure shooter in a wheelchair I think I've ever seen. And you just to beat Dave in a shooting drill was just an accomplishment, And so I would seek him out and try to shoot against him, and that. Same thing with Brian, even though he beat me every single time, like I said. And also just training with an able-bodied player, it's just everything happens faster. They're taller, so they get rebounds faster, so the ball comes back to you quicker. And not only his skill, but his functional ability as an able-bodied person just sort of pushed me to train a little bit faster, mentally and physically. So that's a couple things, right?
Yeah, that's well, it's in the you bring into different elements of what your particular training plans, how you brought it about. So well, I'd say you're probably satisfied. Maybe you would like to know a little bit in depth, but like I said, in terms of actually seeing it, it's probably better to go to your YouTube channel so you can see it firsthand for yourself.
Yeah, there's a few drills in there. Yeah, I'm just talking about sort of general concepts. There's some more specific things on that YouTube channel. But yeah, learning how to train is the earlier you learn how to do that in your career, the better off you are. So, in a sense, I think talking about general principles is maybe more helpful for someone. Like, oh, okay, because a lot of my career and for a wheelchair basketball player, and unless you're in a college town, I mean, over here anyway. Well, unless you're with a club that practices a lot, or you're in a college town, or certain hubs around the country, you're probably by yourself, or you're with one or two other people. You have to be creative, and the chances that there's a really experienced wheelchair basketball coach are pretty slim too. So my experience and the experience I see others having is they have to be able to train on their own or learn how to push themselves in the gym. So to talk about sort of general principles, I think it's good because you take those principles and then go get creative, given where you are in your skill development, and go apply them in your own way, kind of thing. But yeah, there are specific drills out there if you want to check that out.
That's probably a good point you raised in terms of most players have to train by themselves, so they have to learn early doors, having that aspect of self discipline. Or I want to get to, say for example, players might have aspirations of the Paralympics. Well, you have to have that self discipline to do that training, because if you want to get there, you've got to put in the hard work.
Yeah, and I think, obviously able-bodied basketball players are putting in the hard work too, but I just think it's easier for them to plug into a training program or a coach or a training facility, or go down to the Y and play pickup, or at the park and play pickup. Or there's just so many opportunities to play basketball and get better, whereas for us, that's harder. There's less of us, so we're more spread out.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to take ownership of your training, or you can, or if you do, you'll benefit. But I mean, I was, as a teenager before I went to Illinois, I was pretty good, not in a systematic way, but I loved being in the backyard shooting hoops and pretending I was Michael Jordan or Shaq or somebody, and I was imagining I was some NBA player, and so I kind of I liked practice. I liked practicing by myself. So I had the willingness, but not necessarily the strategy. I didn't really know what I was doing, how to practice. And then I went to Illinois for 4 years, and Mike Frogley told me what to do every day, and that was good too, to have someone just tell you do it. Don't ask why, just do it. And I generally didn't ask why, unless I was particularly angry or tired or something. I just wanted to be ornery. But, and then after I left my early 20s, that's when I kind of had to sort of on my own and had to start figuring it out for myself. But you can learn earlier.
So the next question I've got from Ryan Smart, he asks, are you looking to go into coaching now?
I don't have a huge desire to coach. If you think of coaching as, being on the sidelines and game coaching, I don't know. Game coaching just doesn't interest me that much at this point. But I really do like being in the gym with players and doing like individual skill development, or team skill development, or getting, been involved with sort of new rec leagues and house leagues, getting new players involved into the game, grassroots level stuff. I enjoy all that. And I feel like that's a bit of a responsibility to be involved or be supporting that in some way, shape, or form. So that's where it would start for me if it were going anywhere. But
so you see yourself more as a mentoring type of person, as opposed to more so a out and out coach.
I just suppose that's more where my strengths may lie, and that's what I enjoy doing more. And that all has to do with the fact that I like playing still. So I'd rather be in my ball chair with a group of guys. And I've done a bit of this with the Canadian national team over the last few years, going to the academy and working out with some of the young players. And I'm learning from them, they're learning from me. We're sort of workshopping new drills and just different ways of training. Because for them, they're doing a lot of the same things all the time. Any kind of new any kind of new approaches to their skill development or whatever, I think are welcome. And so that's fun. But we'll see. Maybe at some point the light will go on, and I'll suddenly be intrigued by coaching. But I've always been a pretty good practice player in terms of like, let's go guys, and like, let's do this drill or that. So that's always kind of been my MO, if in the absence of a coach running practice. So that's just maybe what I'm more comfortable with. And I was never the brains behind the operation ever, for sure. The guys that I consider more natural, like game coaches like Joey Johnson or Richard Peter or Jamie Borsoff, we had all these guys with like PhDs in wheelchair basketball. I always felt like kind of the dumb guy, and just had to pretend I was smart enough to be there. But guys who just kind of could read a game, you're like, you know what, they're doing this, we should do that, as well as Frogley, obviously, the coach. But we just had such a high IQ, and those are the guys who need to be head coaches, So, and Joey Joey was coaching with GB in Rio as assistant coach, and so I hope, obviously, they tried to tap that potential, and did tap that potential from him.
Well, it's like you say, if you've got that skill set to become a coach, you're in the best position to do that. Whereas you feel that you're not comfortable in that role, you could maybe look at it from more of a mentoring role and giving back to, like as you say, to the up and coming players that are coming through and giving your expertise that you've learned along the way to help with them with their development.
Yeah, I suppose not. But I mean, if there was a team and wherever I was living who needed a coach, I wouldn't be opposed to coaching and trying to learn how to do it as best as I could. I wouldn't let like a lack of skill or even inclination hold me back from doing what feeling a need if I felt like I could do it. But what was I going to say? But yeah, I think because I've always enjoyed training and often, not always been the only guy or the guy, but between moments in practice, I like to go find a hoop and like trying to knock out 10 left-handed layups or hit 5 threes or something. Just that skill work I really enjoy. And so if I can share that just sort of approach with players, I feel like that's maybe more valuable than me trying to be on the bench, coaching in that way. Yeah, so that, in other words, it's just different ways of coaching / mentoring, whatever you want to call it, and sort of contributing to the next generation. And just as I got other stuff in life going on, I'm trying to figure out how to help, how to give back.
Okay, well, that's an interesting point what you bring up. And the next question I've got from Ben Lighthowler is as to whether you do any particular exercises or use any training methods to help to prevent injuries.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, like I said, the strength training would be my sort of probably weakest point when it comes to training, but certainly, like any, right from the very beginning at Illinois, I was definitely instructed to take care of my, shoulders and try to avoid, just try to do exercises on external rotation and anything that's going the opposite direction of your push, just to keep your shoulders and all your musculature balanced as much as possible, which is kind of fighting a losing battle because anyone in a wheelchair is going to kind of end up, unless they have naturally great posture, going to end up sort of shoulders sort of rolling forward and maybe fight, bad posture and that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's always just been in my mind for the last 20, 25 years to make sure I'm rowing and doing pull-ups and doing external rotators. And that's sort of the, I just try to hit that as often in different ways as I can. And of course, stretching a lot. Pretty groundbreaking stuff, right?
Well, it's probably a lot of people forget about stretching because I've done all the hard work. I don't want to spend the extra 5 to 10 minutes doing this. It'll be all right. But then obviously the next day, as a result, your DOMs are going to be that much worse because you've not re-lengthened the muscle back to its normal length.
Yeah, as you get older, it accumulates over time. You neglect to stretch when you're younger. That's one thing. You neglect to stretch when you're older, and you start to really notice, like, your range of motion suffering for it, and that can lead to all kinds of problems. Performance, uh, inhibit performance. It could also lead to injury. So, all you old folks like me out there, don't forget.
And then the next question I've got from Christian Boothby asks, "What's the best way to increase power in your shooting without losing form?"
Oh, that's a good question. That's something that I wonder sometimes, especially with the new 3-point line. I'm sort of semi-comfortable with. I say new. It's been since, I think, 2010 that they've used the longer FIBA 3-point line, but um, I'm a little bit lucky. I have long arms and a long trunk, and I'm able to generate a lot of power just from the length of my levers or whatever, without being the strongest guy in the room ever. And I've probably, well, not probably, I have, used the heavy ball before, but I kind of figured out or was told that that's probably not a good idea, and never really used it much. So, I don't know. I guess that's my way of saying I'm not sure. Other than when the chair I said I was sort of struggling with in London. Part of the thing that in London I took significantly less threes. I just wasn't comfortable with the line, and partly had to do with my installation. I was really rigid. I was using a rigid front instead of those straps I talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I used like an aluminum plate, and I also had an aluminum back. And so, in theory, I thought I'd just be that much better able to transfer my body movements into my chair, but it sort of worked the opposite way because there was no noise in the system, so it was kind of a little jittery feeling, and also my knees weren't independent anymore, so those little. Sometimes I would extend one knee and not the other. I didn't realize this, but that's what I was doing with my straps. But with the foot plate, it wasn't able to do that. They weren't able to function independently. And I think the combination of that hard back and hard front didn't allow me to extend through my back, and I lost some range of my shot because I could simply just jump in a chair with straps and just get 2 or 3, comfort 2 or 3 extra feet on my shot comfortably anyway. And so there's something about being really sort of my back being extended and being not having a little bit of play in my trunk. So all that to say, I think it taught me that your trunk really does help generate power, which is tough luck, I guess, if you're class 1. But if you're a mid-pointer and upper, hard point player, maybe you look at guys' shooting technique and really take a look at their trunk and see what role that's playing in generating range. So maybe that more than doing, benching more or something like that, although I'm sure that helps. And David Ng, who's like a very disciplined guy when it comes to lifting, he's been very strong, and his game's really based on power. He always felt like when he's in the strength phase of training, that's when his shooting was at the worst. So he made sure that, if he wouldn't need to be like doing hypertrophy phases, but if he was doing speed, if he's more in a speed phase or a power phase, or a maintenance phase, that was all fine. But if he's in a strength phase, like high weight, low reps, trying to increase his strength, that's when his shooting was at the worst. So he'd make sure he would avoid those phases around competition time, make sure he cycled it or scheduled it right so that he wasn't struggling with that when a big tournament was coming up or whatever.
That's quite interesting, that aspect of macrocycling the training to fit the performance element of things. And the next question he asked, it's a little bit on the same lines. What is the best way to increase that explosive first push?
Well, I think it's all those things. It's building strength and then translating into power and speed. I think my speed, I'm probably, if you looked at me, you'd think, I have quick hands. I'm like hand speed, maybe less so now as I slow down a little bit with age, but it really is a combination of hand speed and power. And I think power is it's generated in the weight room, but also through technique. I had an interesting sort of experience when I played in Australia and trained with some guys over there. And they had this one drill where they just went to the baseline and took one powerful push and then rolled to, I don't know what it was, a 3-point line, turn around and one push back. And they did the same thing with 2 pushes. And all my training would be like, as soon as you said go, get your hands going as fast as possible. And I think what they were doing, both, this was sort of, strength, power training, but also maybe more skill training, as they were just teaching them and training to get the most out of that first push, technique-wise, like transferring as much as that power into that first push, because that's all you got, and then you have to coast the rest of the way, if you follow what I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little bit of a corrective for me, because I was always about just get those hands moving as fast as possible kind of thing, rather than thinking about how to transfer as much power to each push as possible. The foundation of my sort of chair skills, sort of power training, has always been, still is, like we call chair skills, which is just towing somebody in all manner of ways. Now, I've had strength and conditioning people tell me that's not ideal. Depending on how much the person behind you weighs, it's too much resistance. Like a sprinter wouldn't use that much resistance. They would use a band. Like if I have a guy who's like 150 pounds behind me, they might say you actually want, say, 30 pounds of resistance. You definitely want resistance training, but not that much resistance. But it happens to be a convenient way to train. If you're in the gym with somebody or a group of people, go grab somebody. They hold on your back bar and you do power starts and stops and half court toe and all these kind of ways of getting around the gym. And but this is, I guess, while I've done the same exercises all my career, I've sort of learned how to do it smarter. So when we were in college, we would work our way through the course of the year up to like 9 minutes stations. So we would do that kind of thing for 9 minutes. So what that meant was like, what it ended up being was the first minute you're working power, and the next 8 minutes you're just slogging your way through. And that's no way to train power. I'm no expert, but I know that. So, and I think everybody's learned those are sort of rudimentary days with chair skills, at least around in my circles. So we've learned to work in more rest, so that every time you step to the line, you have some, you're actually working with your power pushes and not just slogging through like the grind of 10 minutes. That's not getting you any faster. So it's the right amount of rest, which is tough to tell young people sometimes, but or anybody who's like really driven to train hard, that you just got to wait another minute, because that's when you're going to be ready for that next rep.
That's definitely a good point in terms of, like you say, a lot of people don't take account of the importance of rest.
Right. And coaches want to establish a culture of hard work, and that's one of the ways that they do it. So it's a challenge for coaches to be able to instill hard work in their players, but also be smart about how they're training. I think that's not an easy challenge to meet, but an important one.
And the next question I've got from Colin Illick asks, what does your diet consist of, and do you happen to use any supplements? It's something you brought up earlier that you didn't.
I mean, aside from a bit of protein powder now and then for a shake, no, I don't use any kind of supplements. And my diet is just kind of normal these days. And I've done some. Yeah, it's not particularly sophisticated, but I'm not really in a huge training phase at the moment. So, living in, I just try to eat a balanced meal, and I'm raising a son now, and I want him to eat well. So, just make sure the plate's balanced, and I'm not too much on, overthinking that too much. Avoid the, moderation on the stuff that, on the beer and cheese and stuff that are more maybe you wouldn't want to build your diet on, and that's all I got for you on that topic.
Okay, and then one a little bit different now. Neil Pratt asks, "Are you still writing songs?"
Well, yes and no. My wife is more the prolific songwriter in terms of quantity and quality. So she's always writing songs. I kind of do every now and then. So yeah, but we're getting ready to go on tour. We're leaving Thursday for a month of shows out in Western Canada, And we're also recording an album, a full-length album at the moment. So we're more in that phase as opposed to writing new songs right now. But appreciate the question. And, little plug. Check out the Layawakes if you have a moment. And, we're putting out a video soon. And we have a single that's done. And I'm not sure when that's going to come out. But we'll have a new album out next year sometime.
Okay. And the final question I've got from Anna Jackson. She asked, if you could give new players one bit of advice, what would it be?
I think something I touched on earlier. It's just learn how to have fun by yourself in the gym. Not that you always have to train by yourself, but I just guarantee everyone in wheelchair basketball is going to end up in the gym by themselves, and thinking, where is everybody? And I don't want to do this by myself. Just because, as I mentioned, there's just compared to able-bodied basketball and able-bodied sports, there's just not as many people out there. So you're going to find yourself in the gym by yourself or on a basketball court outside in your backyard or whatever. And you just got to kind of I don't know if this is something you can learn, but to the extent that it maybe you learn, something that you can learn, just learn how to push yourself, have fun with it, You hit, I keep talking about left-handed layups, so maybe that was such a big thing for me or on my mind recently, but if you hit 10 in a row, try to hit 12 in a row and make a game of it and reward yourself. And I don't know, just whatever it takes for you to have fun by yourself in the gym, working on your game. That's going to help you improve and sustain. I think, because if you enjoy practice, then you'll get better. It's hard to get better if it's practice is always a sloth. And we just have the extra challenge of sometimes having to push ourselves. So yeah, learn how to enjoy training, or find someone fun to train with, someone you enjoy being around. It doesn't have to be the best player, just someone you enjoy being in the gym with that makes training fun. Yeah.
So I think we'll wrap it up there, Patrick. So thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to answer those questions.
Hey, my pleasure.
And if anybody wanted to get in contact with you to ask maybe a few more questions, what would be the best way for them to do that in terms of social media?
I guess leave a comment on my YouTube channel or just find me on Twitter. I think I'm Anderson Patrick, and just shoot me a message there or something.
Okay. So once again, Patrick, thanks again for coming on the show.
You bet. All the best.
And for everybody else, this podcast will be aired every Thursday. So until then, I will see you next week.